everybody, welcome to the Museum Roadshow. My name's Amy Degerstrom. I'm the director here at the Becker County Museum, and today we're going to talk about bootlegging and prohibition, because who doesn't like to know about that? So prohibition, why would we have prohibition in the first place? Prohibition, of course, meant that you would be arrested for sales or transport of intoxicating liquors, right? So any alcoholic beverage. And really that came about because in 1919 or so, of course, we're coming out of World War I. Wheat had been rationed during the war because they needed it for food for the soldiers. And so there was not a lot of access to alcohol-making products like wheat and barley and grain and such. And so there were groups of people kind of working to keep it that way, to keep it a hard process to get anything to drink. A few of those groups were people like the Women's Christian Temperance Union, which was actually founded in the 1870s in the state of Minnesota and was still active all the way until the 1980s, so it lasted a long time. And that group was really focused on kind of the moral part of prohibition. So the fact that if husbands are going out and spending their paychecks at the saloon and at the bar, then wives and children are left behind at home and they don't have any way to support their household, support the children that were there. And of course, women at that time were really very dependent upon either their husbands or their fathers or their brothers or whoever it was that was helping to care for them in an income capacity. And so Women's Christian Temperance Movement was really very active, especially here in Detroit Lakes. It was named after Lucy Hayes, who was the President Hayes's wife. And she was really a big advocate for it on a national level, and that came down to a local level here in Detroit Lakes in Becker County. They had little banks like this one that they would leave around town, kind of like the Humane Society has banks today, right? So you could leave your donations for temperance. They had pledge cards that you could use, and those pledge cards would say that you vowed never to touch or drink intoxicating liquors. They supported a youth organization that was also part of this effort to kind of reach the kids young before they started drinking, and sort of on and on. And a lot of the sort of statements and the ideas behind the WCTU really continue through things like the MAD Association, so Mothers Against Drunk Driving, use a lot of the same kind of tactics as the Temperance Union did. Their slogan was agitate, educate, legislate. So that was their idea of teaching people, getting them excited about it, and then trying to pass legislation through the state of Minnesota. And that was successful in 1920. Not coincidentally, the same year women got the right to vote. So I think those two certainly went hand in hand. It was also called the Volstead Act, which was the 18th Amendment, and that was the one that, again, pushed prohibition through the state and the national legislature. So after that happened, we have all kinds of people who are having to then enforce this law. Right? So who are those people? It's a hard law to enforce, I think. There were 13 saloons just in the city of Detroit at that time. There were about 40 of them in and around Becker County. And there were just a few marshals that were put in charge for the state of Minnesota going around the state and closing all of the saloons. And the lead marshal was named William Pussyfoot Johnson. So if you hear an older generation talking about pussyfooters, those were the marshals and his deputies coming through trying to stir up the stills and find people creating illegal liquor. But they came through all of the saloons. We're standing in a bar here that came from Wolf Lake, so this would have been one of the spots they might have entered, and they would literally go in and do smash and grab. So they would take all of the kegs, they'd pour them on the street, they'd smash all the bottles, lots of destruction of property. And I think people were pretty upset about that because, of course, they felt like their liberties were being impeded upon, their businesses were being impeded upon. And there was a great sort of debate amongst the communities in Becker County as to what they should do about it. The areas in and around White Earth had been really being, I guess, somewhat harassed by the federal government starting in about 1907 about the issue of alcohol, because at that time the government decided to enforce one of the pieces of the 1855 treaty that formed White Earth that said that you would be arrested for selling intoxicating liquor to Native Americans or to Indians. And so the federal government had really been enforcing that in a pretty hardcore way. And Pussyfoot Johnson came up and did a lot of smash and grab along the reservation boundaries and in and through the reservation. And the community of Mahnomen was really the first to stand up to him, and their own police came in and arrested him and his marshals for destruction of property. They got sent off to federal court in Duluth and then in St. Paul, and of course eventually the charges were dropped. They didn't have to pay any fines, and all the bills got sent back to Mahnomen and to White Earth. So I guess, I don't know if they won, maybe, but certainly they were working hard to close and end drinking establishments here in Becker County. But Becker County, as we all know, is a place that doesn't always like to follow the rules, and so we worked as citizens pretty hard to kind of go against those law enforcement officials and those temperance union ladies, and to create stills and create bootlegging in and across the county. And so as we go into our discussion next week, we'll talk a little bit about those bootleggers and those moonshiners and all of the places in Becker County where you could go to find a good drink. Thanks for watching Museum Roadshow. This is Amy. I'll see you next week.